In Luke 15, it says there will be joy in the presence of angels over one sinner who repents. So that's me. I'm the one sinner who repented. And that's my story. But I'll tell you, I'll give you a little more detail. All right. So I grew up in a family that was different. I'm the youngest of 5 boys, 2 older sisters, and a younger sister. My father was 50 when I was born. He was 56 when my little sister was born. He had had a tough life. His mother died when he was about 10. His stepmother didn't like him, and he pretty much had to leave the house and go to relatives at age 13. He worked in a coal mine as an electrician. He went through the Depression. He was a medic's helper in the war. So our family was different. Let me give you 2 examples of different and see if you think it's different. When I was about 13, 12 or 13, my father turned me loose in Mr. Big in Bridgeton with $20 to buy school clothes for the year. He was cheap. We weren't poor. He had a good job. He was just different. When I was about 16, I had a motorcycle that I had bought myself. It would scare you. I drove it through the woods about half a mile to the gravel pit. And back then we had what they called the midwinter vacation. In February you get a week off. So the Saturday of that vacation I went out to the gravel pit. There were some guys a couple guys were sitting on the edge, and I thought I would show off a little. So I did a jump, try to be Evel Knievel. My landing was not good. The handlebars got me right here. So I rode home. I had labored breathing. I was urinating blood. So my father put me in a car, took me to Dr. Beck's house. Dr. Beck was out in the yard doing his lawn, and he felt around a little and he says, "Take him to the hospital." My father put me in the car and took me back home. And by now my breathing was better. So I guess because he was a medic's helper in the Army, he'd seen guys busted up worse than this who survived, so he took me home. And hospitals were expensive. So I laid in that bed for that whole vacation. Monday morning, I went back to school. So is that different? That's different. During that time, we went to the Baptist church. My father would load us all up in the car and take us to the Baptist church. I was pretty much waiting till I was old enough and I didn't have to go anymore. They never reached me. And I was a pretty good boy until about age 15. And then I became rebellious. Let me give you a couple examples of rebellious. I got with a crowd. We did a lot of skipping school, a lot of bad behavior. One day I was in a parking lot working on my car, which I bought myself, 57 Chevy. And my gym class went by that I was supposed to be in. And at the end of that line was Coach Serace. And he says, "Steiner, you just failed gym for the year." So the next year I had to take gym a little more often than everybody else. And then there was, in those days, things were a little different. And sometimes boys would settle their differences with a little bit of violence, you know what I mean? And So me and another guy had some differences, and we decided to settle this like a man, right? So we took our cars to a secluded place, and we circled the cars. And the two guys that had the differences would get in the middle and throw hands, you know what I mean? Duke it out, right? Unbeknownst to me, the other group had conspired that I was not going to win that fight. Of course, that shouldn't have been a problem because I had my boys with me, right? Well, I was out there getting whooped up on, and my boys were standing there going, duh, right? So that's one of the first times I thought that maybe I need new friends. So God was working on me. Over the years, I was getting less comfortable with my friends in bar rooms and misbehavior and people who weren't honest and abusers and all kinds of things. And one night we were at a bar, and I just got so disgusted with what was happening, I left my friends there. Of course, we were back together the next week. But God was working on me. A couple years later, by now I was working as a refrigeration serviceman, air conditioning refrigeration serviceman, up around Camden, Philadelphia, Pennsauken, in that area. And I was spending my time up there and not hanging out so much with my friends. But I still hung out with them. So one year, New Year's Eve, seemed like everywhere I went, there was something evil being talked about. And I was disgusted. You know, I thought people should do better than this. I even mentioned it to one of the young men that worked with me, who was pretty socially active, and he said, "You might as well just join in." I couldn't join in. God was working on me. So I was becoming less and less comfortable with evil, so God was working on me. About this time, my brother Larry returned from the Navy. And one day, my father made a comment. He said, "Yeah, I got him home from the Navy, still living home. Look at this." So my brother took it as a hint, and he went and got an apartment. And during that time, Campaigns Northeast contacted him, and he started going to Vineland Church. So I watched him, right? You can tell when your brother's, when it's the real thing or not, when it's your brother. You know, he still hung out with us. So to tell you the truth, I was pretty impressed with him. You know, I saw a different guy. So one day I told him, I said, I went out and sat in the car beside him when he was going to church. I said, "I'm going with you." So when I went, I met Dan, and Dan had me. You know, I was baptized probably a week later. And that's how I got here. So it was, that was the time I repented, became a Christian. So right now I'm working in Millville because a guy came into town saying he wanted to start a church, and I thought, how am I going to explain to God that somebody started a church in my hometown and I wouldn't help? So I don't want to have to explain that. So I'm working with them. So right now, we have some local people, a couple of them, new converts, struggling, looking for a building, but I have hope and faith that it'll do well. I still go on the mission. I go on all the missions. You know, I don't worship here. I still love everybody. I'll be going on the France trip next time. I've gone to every one except the one I was sick with COVID. I'll be in camp next week. So what do I do now? Try to do better. Do I still struggle with sin? Well, as far as I know, everybody who has a heartbeat still struggles with sin. So I guess we need to ask ourselves, am I enjoying the struggle or am I trying to do better? Thanks for your attention.
Thanks, Carl. Now we'll hear from Tammy, and then we'll have some remarks afterwards.
Sorry. Good morning. So, as all of you know, I'm very, very introverted. So this is a struggle to begin with. Many of you don't know that I lost my father when I was 2 years old from a drunk driver. I lost my mom when I was 19, just turned 19, from lung cancer. So I have been on my own since then. Didn't grow up in the church. Didn't have a direction to go when my mom passed. And I was lost, completely lost, heading down a direction that I didn't need to be heading in, and was looking for something to get me out. And little notes to me, that's when Ed came into my life. He introduced me to church and showed me what God can do in your life. I was baptized at 29 years old and was married. And then Ed started talking to me about Camp Manitawny. I am not a camper. I like the outdoors when it's not too humid, but didn't think I would ever want to go to Camp Manitawny and work. In 2010, Ed was working junior high 1 as a counselor, and Adam and I went up. He was 6, and I worked in the dining room, and it was okay. But I still really wasn't feeling it. Still didn't think that I would want to work at Camp Manitawny. And as you can see from the picture, when we were getting ready to leave, Adam's like, no, I'm not going. He was staying at camp. In 2016, Aaron Pearl begged me to be a counselor, that he needed another girl counselor. And I'm like, nope, not doing it. I didn't feel comfortable with not knowing the Bible and not looking forward to spending a week in a cabin with no air conditioning with preteen girls. But he told me it would change my life, and it really did. Before the week was even through, I was talking to Ed, telling him, I need this for my cabin next year. We need to get Christmas lights. We need to do this. 2017, I worked for junior high 1. 2018, I worked junior high 1 and elementary 1. We've gone back for family camp. And in 2019, I was a head counselor for the girls for junior high 1 and a Bible teacher for elementary 1. When Aaron and Jen retired, I moved to elementary 1 as the Bible teacher. Adam and I kept going to family camp. Ed was always working. And this year we went back and I worked junior high 1 with Miss Alice in the office, and it was an amazing experience. I know camp holds many memories for many people, and I will say I have grown to love camp. As soon as we pull into camp, I can feel God's love envelop me. The friendships that I have made, serving God, sorry, it helps me to not be as introverted as I am. And I can just feel God's love with me everywhere I go. So camp has definitely become a special place for me, considering I never wanted to do it. Thank you.